Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my presentation looking at the links between domestic abuse and suicide, particularly amongst male victims. I'm really sorry that I cannot be with you in Sevonoaks today. I really had intended to, just things have got in the way and I can't be in two places at once, unfortunately. But I hope what I say is of interest, and I've left my contact details both on this slide and my last slide. Please feel free to reach out and carry on the conversation with me directly by email or on LinkedIn. Okay, so just in the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to run through some statistical data about who is dying in domestic abuse related suicides. I'm going to share with you some specific thoughts that I have about male victims, and then I'm going to highlight some of the recommendations that I've included in one of my research reports recently about how to reduce domestic abuse related suicides. Who am I? Well, I have been the Suicide Prevention Programme Manager since 2014, based within KCC's Public Health team. And I think that's important to highlight. I'm coming at this very much from a suicide prevention angle rather than a domestic abuse angle. I'm not an expert in domestic abuse, although I'm learning more and more every day. And then I guess the real reason that I've been invited to speak to you today is that last year I completed a Churchill Fellowship looking for global best practice in relation to domestic abuse related suicides. If you've not heard of the Churchill Fellowship before, please Google it now. It's a UK-based charity that fund UK citizens to go anywhere in the world to research anything that individual wants to go and research. And all they want in return is for you to come back and try and make a positive difference in this country. It absolutely seems too good to be true, and it genuinely is. Well, it's not too good to be true because it is true. It's a phenomenal opportunity. I was really lucky to be awarded the fellowship, and I would strongly recommend that if you're passionate about anything, it could be this subject, it could be anything else, please check them out. This is the front cover of my Churchill Fellowship report that I published in February 25, so just a month or so ago, and it includes 66 ways to reduce domestic abuse related suicides. I'm not going to go through all 66 today, don't have time, and not all of them relate to male victims, but I'm going to share a few with you at the end. Okay, so very quick look at who and how many people are dying in DA related suicides. Well, I'm speaking to you in the week that the National Police Chiefs Council published their second annual report, which shows that for 2 years running now, more victims of domestic abuse are dying by suicide than are being murdered by their intimate partner. So, as I say in the front cover of my Churchill report, the person most likely to kill a victim of domestic abuse is themselves. In that research that the NPCC have done, they have found that of those suicides of DA victims, 75 out of the 354 were male victims, so about 21%. That's slightly lower than what we find in Kent. We're up to about 40% of our victims of domestic abuse taking their own lives are men. So a slight difference there. But overall, the numbers are way too high. If you're really interested in this subject, I think the NKISH report, so National Confidential Inquiry into Suicide and Self-Harm, based in the University of Manchester, their report into suicides amongst middle-aged men is really interesting, and they highlight that about 7% of the middle-aged men who die by suicide have been victims of DA. And again, if you extrapolate that to the number of middle-aged men dying by suicide generally, you're going to be well into the hundreds, if not thousands. And just to highlight that absolutely all of these figures will be an underestimate, given that we know domestic abuse is massively underreported, particularly under male victims of domestic abuse. They're far less likely to report than female victims, and absolutely we know that female victims don't report 100% of the time either. So we know that these stats are going to be an underestimate. So who is dying in DA-related suicides? Well, absolutely we know that female victims are.
I felt so drained. He pushed me over the edge. I felt useless and like I was dead inside. He treated me like an animal, told me I was worthless. I was completely alone. I wanted to kill myself. I needed to get out.
And so are male victims.
The way she abused me was very different to the way abuse is traditionally depicted. It wasn't violent, but if you can drive someone insane to the point they want to take their own life, then that's just as damaging.
And then finally, there's this third group of people who are both labelled as a victim and a perpetrator.
They had been coercively controlled for years, but when they finally lashed out, they were the one arrested. They develop addictions, lash out more, or kill themselves.
And this is a really interesting group to me. I think we need to do, as a society, we need to do much more research into this group. There are more men in this group than women. So particularly for yourselves in the conference today, that's a group that should be of particular interest, I think. Okay, so why? It might seem obvious, but why do victims of domestic abuse attempt suicide?
I knew that he was going to kill me, so it wasn't a matter of choosing to die, just who was going to do it.
And that's that first voice is a member of the cohort that they are so convinced, these victims are so convinced they're going to be murdered by their perpetrator, that in order to take some element of control back about the way they die, they are considering suicide. But there are other cohorts. Not everyone is convinced they're going to be murdered.
You don't have to be physically strong or use violence to kill someone. I bet all the money I've got that there are a significant number of male victims who end up taking their own lives as a result of the abuse they've suffered.
And that's because they are so beaten down by the coercive control elements that are employed by the perpetrator, or they may just feel overwhelmingly trapped and exhausted and cannot find another way out.
When we were shopping, I would stare at my feet so I didn't run the risk of getting caught glancing at another woman. It becomes a learned behaviour. They talk about victims being isolated as if it's something active that the perpetrator does, but it's far more insidious than that. You end up isolating yourself.
Okay, so moving on quickly, because I know we haven't got much time, just some general thoughts about male victims. And to be fair, they came out in those kind of quotes there. But when I was doing my research, I was often told that actually one of the biggest issues is that male victims feel let down by the services. They feel as though they're not going to be believed. And so this one quote in the orange box, who was a victim, wanted to go to the police, wanted to tell the truth, but when they did, they were the one that actually got arrested. And they finished the quote by saying, it's a really scary place to be when the police who are meant to help you kind of become the enemy. And in the blue bubble, you can see that, and this is very common, that I was told that officers are arriving at domestic incidents predisposed to believe that the female is always going to be the victim. So what can we do? Just a few of my 66 ways to reduce DA suicides. And I've got whole sections on providing better support for men and boys. But critically, the most simple thing that everyone in the room today could take away and start putting into their practice tomorrow is when you are supporting a victim of domestic abuse, it could be female, it could be male, it doesn't really matter, but make sure they're asked, are they feeling suicidal, and have you ever made a previous suicide attempt in your life? Because without knowing those two answers, it's very difficult to create a sustainable safety plan that's going to be effective. And that leads on to the next point, that every safety plan that is prepared with a victim of domestic abuse should absolutely contain sections on keeping that individual safe from suicide, as well as keeping them safe from the perpetrator. I do also think that we need to provide specific training in relation to male victims for all frontline professionals. So the conference today in Sevonoaks is going a long way to support that. We really need to understand the different nuances that go on between male and female victims of DA and try and ensure that we are all better informed. And then finally, this one isn't male victims specifically, but I think it is absolutely just worth sharing with you all. I've spent a couple of years researching this topic, And as I say, I've put together 66 different recommendations, but this is the most important because it recognises that absolutely I do not have all the answers. We need to come together as a nation and as a society to really explore every aspect of these deaths in much more detail. There are so many different nuances. The gender of the victims is just one of those nuances, but what about age? What about sexuality? What about intersectionality with health conditions? Does the different type of domestic abuse matter? So, for instance, does sexual abuse carry a greater suicide risk than coercive control or stalking or financial? We just don't know. We need to do a huge amount more research. So finally, if you want to see the full report, there is the link. And if you want to get in touch with me, please reach out. I'd love to carry the conversation on over email. I hope you have a great rest of the session. Thank you.